I'm Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We're co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Today we're going to talk about FFRF's newest lawsuit with one of our attorneys, Patrick Elliott, and we'll also meet Max Nibert, an amazing young teenage activist who is suing his school over a Christian revival.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
In early February, Max Nibert, a senior at Huntington High School in West Virginia, led a dramatic walkout at his school to protest an evangelical Christian revival that some of the students had been forced to attend.
Since then, Max has become a student plaintiff in a high-profile federal lawsuit that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has filed on behalf of 11 parents and students in the district. Max Nibert will be accepting FFRF's Richard and Beverly Hermsen Student Activist Award of $5,000 at FFRF's October convention in San Antonio, by the way. And I'm glad we don't have to wait until October to meet you, Max. Thank you for standing up for students and for the First Amendment and for joining us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for presenting the award. It's really reassuring that an organization that I admire as much as the FFRF is supportive of this effort.
Well, it's an exciting story, and we think you're very brave. Also joining us on today's show is FFRF Senior Counsel, Patrick Elliott. Patrick wrote the legal complaint, and he's part of the litigation team working on this case, which is known as Mays versus Cabell County Board of Education. So, Patrick, it's nice to have you here, too.
Glad to be joining you today.
Before we talk about what happened in the lawsuit, we do have a clip of a news segment that explains a lot about the case. Let's take a look.
This walkout comes after a religious revival event organized by and led by the Fellowship of Christian Athletes invited Nick Walker Ministries to speak. Now, according to a district spokesperson, the event was meant to be voluntary, but two teachers, quote, made a mistake and took the entire class to the assembly. He says the teachers have been corrected and the district doesn't expect it to happen again. However, in this statement by Max Nibert, a student at Huntington High School, this walkout was, quote, an attempt to convey our grievance. Response from the administration and the County Board of Education were not satisfactory.
So, Max, can you tell us what happened? Walk us through what happened at your school and why you were literally led to walk out of your own school.
I guess I'll explain it from my point of view as it happened. So we have a period at Huntington High. It's our homeroom period. It's called Compass. And I was in Compass that week, towards the beginning of the week, and I was told that we would be having a guest speaker later in the week, and that we would all be going down, all of our Compass classes would be going down to the auditorium to attend. So, I thought, it's whatever. It's probably an anti-drug conference or something like that, that all high schools have. And my teacher told me we would be going later in the week. Well, a few days later, some of my friends that are non-religious folks themselves were sending me pictures and videos of the revival that was happening in the auditorium, saying, you need to check this out because I'm not religious. And I told my teacher I wanted to leave, and they said I couldn't. So just by talking with them, and doing some of my own research, I learned eventually that a Christian revivalist sermon was held by Reverend Nick Walker in the auditorium at Huntington High School during the school day, and that multiple students and multiple classrooms of students asked to leave and were told that that was not allowed.
Wow.
And, you know, that the next morning, after I figured all that out, I wrote the walkout letter just because I think when something that we find to be completely unacceptable as Americans and as human beings happens to us and those we care about, you know, it's not only right, but it's an obligation to take action.
So you wrote a walkout letter. Do you mean that you addressed it to the principal, or was it a petition?
It was, so I wrote the letter and addressed copies to both the administration at Huntington High and the Board of Education in Cabell County, and sent them both, and then posted it online as well.
We have a clip of you, Max, during that walkout. There were about 100 other students who joined you, right?
That's correct.
I have never been prouder of a group of my peers than I am right now. When ordinary citizens find their circumstances to be unfair, they change them. And that's exactly what we're doing today. We all know why we're here. So I say, stay strong in your passion, calculated in your actions, and pure in your heart. And together there's nothing we can't accomplish. Thank you.
So that's such a wise and thoughtful thing to say, Max. Were you surprised when your walkout got international attention?
Oh, surprised is an understatement. You know, when I wrote the letter, it was originally just covered by a few local news outlets, and I expected maybe a dozen, 2 dozen students to be out there with me. But, you know, when I walked out the doors after second period, I was astounded by the number of kids there, and just we felt so supported. And then, you know, we did a story with AP News, and then everybody just kind of picked it up from there. And it was an absolute whirlwind of an experience. And I couldn't be more thankful for all the support we've received.
Who would have thought that in West Virginia there'd be so many students that care about state-church separation? That's really, I guess that shows us that something's happening in the country. From when we were young, where it was maybe, 4% who were non-religious, now it's like 30% or more of your generation who are not religious at all. Were you raised Christian and then you left? What happened in your story?
I was raised in a Christian, you know, a large Christian family, and I came away from it. I think I was in second or third grade. I remember I had an adventure Bible that a member of my family had gotten me, and I was laying in bed reading it, and it kind of hit me for the first time in my life that that's not who I am.
Well, thank you, Max. So we also have Patrick Elliott waiting patiently remotely here. So Patrick, let's turn to some of your legal expertise. What did the high school and the Board of Education, what were they doing wrong here? Why are we taking a lawsuit against them?
I think a lot of people's first reaction to this is wrong. You know, not only on the legal side that we know, but students who attended this knew that something wasn't right about it going on. So that's a pretty big sign that you might be on, the wrong side of the First Amendment. But here, during the school day, schools can't be pushing religion on kids or allowing these outside evangelists in to do that. So, we took a look overall at the circumstances of this event, and this was almost as bad as you can get for an in-school activity. The preacher was preaching for students to give their lives over to Jesus right there, like a very high-pressured sales tactic. And as you've already discussed, some students were not there voluntarily. Their classes were mandated to go. But besides that, even as a voluntary event, this isn't the type of thing that public schools can be promoting or putting on. This particular school system is one where the Freedom from Religion Foundation has brought complaints for a number of years. So this is more, like par for the course rather than a simple mistake or something that accidentally happened. I think this is much more a part of a pattern and practice of how this school system is run.
Now, the legal complaint goes into a lot of detail about each of the plaintiffs. Some of them are parents, some of them are students like Max, although Max is the only one who is identified by name. But could we talk a little bit more about this Nick Walker who runs the Nick Walker Ministries and what he was saying during this revival? My understanding is that he was telling kids that if they didn't give their lives to Jesus, they were going to go to hell. Isn't that right?
Right. Right. It actually, the language is almost worse than that, because he said that they'd be tormented eternally. So that's obviously what he's referring to, but he's trying to put in the minds of these, high schoolers at this school. And also he gave a talk at a middle school within the district the day before, that they're going to be basically tortured if they don't make a decision that day to turn their lives over to Jesus. So this was a pretty intense event. Even emotionally, some of the students had raised their hands, so then adults came and prayed with them. But this is part of this tactic, which, the foundation we're familiar with to some extent, that these evangelists will try to get into schools. Nick Walker is like that, although I'd say it almost feels like he's from a different decade in terms of how his ministry is run, very much about this torture students would suffer if they don't give their lives over to Jesus. So he's doing a revival at a local church in Huntington, and that he had been doing it for maybe at the time about 2 weeks, and that had continued maybe even to this day. But he's trying to get the whole community revved up and is going to go and try to win souls within the schools, as with these type of tactics. And it's a major concern, obviously, if you're a parent not knowing that this is going on in your school, or you're a student, not knowing your rights. This evangelist comes in, and the school should have known better. That there's people that were in that room, including teachers and school administrators, who shouldn't have let this happen, or should have intervened and stopped it, because you shouldn't have a evangelical minister come into your public school and really put on this high pressure tactics on students.
You said there were adults praying with the students. Who were these adults? Did they just come in from outside?
As far as we know, that there were volunteers from the church, that came in while this event was going on. We also received some reports that teachers were involved in prayer, during this activity. So it wasn't really a student run or student activity. It was both adults and students participating in this.
And the principal was there, and some of the vice principals, correct?
That's right. A number of administrators, including the principal, observed this happen.
So I wanted to talk about the Jewish student who was there, who the Jewish mother is a plaintiff. Can you tell us more about what happened to him? So
this student is one of at least two in the lawsuit that were mandated to attend. Their classes went. They didn't have a choice. The student, again, we're not using the student's name because they're minors, but this student even asked to leave and was told by their teacher that they could not do so. And then, as a Jewish person, having to go through and listen to this preaching session about Jesus, I can only imagine was extremely offensive and was very bothersome, to the student and to Jewish family members of this student. So I think this case is unique in the sense that, we have not just non-religious students, we have some students who are religious but really object to this going on in their school system. And one other thing that really bothered me that Nick Walker said at one point was that he told the students, you are not going to let these students leave without he was talking to God, and he prayed, you are not going to let these students leave without knowing you. It was like a threat, like the doors are going to be locked, and they had to have a conversion. So, well, it's quite a story, very dramatic, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more, Max, about the fallout, what's reaction has been in the community to your suing, and we'll talk a little bit more about the state of the law with Patrick.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name is Katie, and I am an out-of-the-closet atheist. I've never really believed in a God. Of course, there are always those moments where you wish an omnipotent being would swoop down and offer divine intervention, but ultimately, you can't reconcile that with reality. I never really liked attending church either. When I was in grade school, I had to go 5 days a week and once on the weekends, and then in high school I had to go, and I went to Catholic school the entire time. One Ash Wednesday after I got my license, I wasn't able to go to church with my family. So I told my mom I would go, but instead I drove to a park, lit the end of a stick on fire, and smudged the ashes on my forehead to prove that I had gone. Ultimately, the church's position on same-sex marriage, women's rights, and their handling of certain scandals were the final nails in the cross, so to speak. As a feminist and a humanitarian, I find it necessary to come out of the closet and declare my atheism.
We are speaking with 18-year-old high school senior Max Nibert, who led that famous walkout of about 100 students at West Virginia's Huntington High School in February to protest the fact that his school allowed a ministry to put on a Christian revival, and that students in at least 2 homeroom classes were forced to attend. They were told to bow their heads in prayer, and they were warned that they need to follow Jesus or face eternal torment. And we're also speaking with FFRF senior attorney Patrick Elliott about why FFRF is now representing Max and 10 other West Virginia students and parents who are suing their school.
So, Max, I wanted to get back to you and ask you what kind of reaction that you've received, both from other students or people in your community, your hometown, about the walkout and also about the lawsuit.
Well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'll tell you why. You know, personally, from my family and from almost everybody that's reached out to me, you know, in person or online, the reaction has been nothing short of incredible. You know, I've never felt this supported in a venture in my life. At the same time, you know, this, where I'm from, it's still Appalachia. You know, it's big coal country in the middle of the Bible Belt. So even some of my fellow students at Huntington High are not fans of what, you know, myself and the other plaintiffs and the FFRF are up to these days.
But you're not telling them they can't do that in their churches and in their homes. They have freedom, right? You're just complaining about it happening in the public school, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, a large portion of my family is still Christian. You know, the church that Nick Walker is basing himself out of in Huntington is actually the one that I used to go to when I considered myself a religious person.
So what about your family? Is your family supportive of what you're doing?
They are.
That's great.
And I think that support speaks to the fact that myself, the other plaintiffs, and everybody involved, we have absolutely no issue with people practicing whatever they want in their own homes. I think that's one of the most beautiful freedoms that we have in this country. The problem is, you know, when it becomes sponsored by governments and schools. And that's exactly what was the case here.
So Patrick, bouncing off what Max just said, tell us a little bit more about the law that's governing what public schools can do with regard to religion and why we're suing here.
Yeah, you know, I think that the principles are pretty basic. You know, the public schools, including the teachers and officials, can't promote or advance religion. Where there's an exception is we obviously allow students to have their religious beliefs, and including in schools, sometimes they have religious clubs. But that's not some loophole that adults can use to come in and do whatever they want, you know, which seems to be what was going on here. So you can't have adults come into the school system to put on religious events, to engage in prayer and do that type of activity. Teachers and school administrators can't do that type of activity, while students on their own, you know, of their own initiative, and as long as they're leading it, can engage in that. So it's really not that complicated. It's just there are a lot of adults who want to push their religion on other people's kids. And that's wrong, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that.
So, Patrick, there are a number of ministries like Nick Walker that prey on students, P-R-E-Y, as well as pray at them. And as you know, at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, where you are a senior counsel and have written a lot of complaint letters and have been involved in a lot of litigation, we are continually chasing ministries out of the schools because a lot of them get cooperation from school administrators.
You know, I used to do that, I'm embarrassed to say, when I was in the ministry. We used to go into the public schools and do exactly that.
So we're obviously suing in this case, but I mean, it's kind of like a whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Right.
When you have...
I think that's why this is an important case, is because sometimes it's rare that we have the opportunity to step in and try to, you know, go after one of these events when they happen. These groups are traveling evangelists, so they come and they go. A lot of places they go are much smaller school systems where, you know, maybe people wouldn't be as likely to speak out. So that's what's really impressive here is you have Max and our other plaintiffs and all these other students, you know, willing to stand up. And so it was really an opportunity, I think, to stop this type of ministry, you know, Nick Walker or these other groups, which we see all over the place. I've been, you know, doing this for 12 years, and they come under all sorts of different cover to go into schools and promote religion. But, you know, the goals are the same, is really to try to get into schools during the school day, to reach students when they might be, you know, they have to attend school because we have compulsory education laws. And they want to reach these kids. And so I think stopping both the ministry here is going to save and prevent a lot of other students from having to go through this.
So what are we asking for? What's the remedy, the legal remedy in the lawsuit?
We're asking for a court order, so an injunction, and then also a declaratory relief. So basically the court saying this was unconstitutional, it violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, and prohibiting the school system from allowing this group, and also others like it, other religious groups, from putting on religious events during the school day. We hope the school system will, you know, adopt comprehensive policies that will address this. That's really a big part of the goals of this case.
And there's also kind of a symbolic gesture, isn't there, of asking for $1 per of damages per plaintiff? Is that right?
Right. So unfortunately, we can't. You know, there's no money in it for Establishment Clause plaintiffs. Really, you can get $1. Because they say, you know, this is symbolic of your rights being violated. So in addition to those court orders, you can get $1 for those students who've had their rights already violated in the past. But really, it's really just a symbolic gesture.
What are you going to do with your $1, Max?
My $1 is going right up on the wall.
Yes. Well, yes, that's wonderful. So, Max, during the walkout, you said when ordinary citizens find their circumstances to be unfair, they change them. And that's exactly what we're doing today. So your actions really are what have made possible this collective action now to sue your school district. And what would you like to see changed?
I would love to see some kind of cooperation from the county at the board level. You know, in my personal experience with them in this matter and others, they do not seem to be very invested in the well-being of their students, you know, in religious matters and otherwise. So I would really just love to see them reach out, you know, to myself, the other plaintiffs, and everybody else affected by this whole incident and say, what can we do policy-wise to make this right and to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again?
And that's such a small thing to ask, but I don't think that ever happens with our lawsuits. But that's what school boards should be doing. They're there to educate, not to indoctrinate, and they should be modeling a respect for separation of church and state. And they shouldn't be trying to evangelize you.
I wanted to ask you, Max, the 100 or so students who walked out, they were not all atheists, were there? You must have religious friends who also agree that government and religion should be kept separate.
As funny as it sounds, the biggest supporters that myself and others have had in this whole event has been religious parents, you know, most of them Christians, just because they don't want to see their belief system misconstrued in such an awful way by somebody who's, you know, preying, like you all said, on young people.
So, Patrick, some final words about why it's so important to keep religion out of our public schools?
Right. Well, these are our schools for everyone. You know, people of all different backgrounds. That's one of the features of our school system. So to have a school system that's affiliated with one religion pushing religion on kids, that makes it really not available to all families and not available to all students. So we're really protecting that interest for all students, regardless of their religious beliefs or lack of religious beliefs.
And I can point out to somebody who's watching this that if they care about this issue, they can support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. You can support our legal work. You can support us by becoming a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, because this is why we exist, so that we can remedy things like this injustice in West Huntington. But again, Max, it's been so amazing to see your activism and leadership in this. And any final words you have?
I would just like to thank you two and Patrick and everyone else at the FFRF for the amazing initiative that has been taken in this case and the others that you all have covered. So just thank you so much for becoming involved, for this interview, and for the award. It's humbling. So you're going on to college, I understand. What are the chances that you might want to...
Maybe a gap year, Dan.
Or maybe a gap, or whatever. You're going to end up in college. What are the chances you might want to start a chapter of the Secular Student Alliance at your college someday to continue your activism? I'm very interested. I think it's so important for students in high school and college to band together to represent their interests against, a broader institution that might not support them. Wow. So absolutely.
So people can meet you, Patrick, and meet you, Max, at the Freedom from Religion Foundation's 45th Annual Convention at the end of October in San Antonio, where you'll both be speaking, and Max will be so delighted to give you the Student Activist Award and for everything you've done. Well, thank you both for being with us today, Patrick and Max.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.